Succeed series. We recently introduced our community to our storytelling initiative, and in the last 2 weeks, you've had the chance to meet Val Perry and Sydney Hurdle. Today, we're going to spend some time with Richard Sayer, who joins us in our belief that every business, organization, and person has a story, and one that is worth telling. The stories that connect us and inspire us to want to invest in each other, but that often go untold. So I'm excited to talk to Rich. Rich, great to see you today. And to
Hey,
find out why he chose the line of work of storytelling and how he's used photography and writing to get to know others and share what they tell him. So if you have any questions for Rich today, you can submit them in the Zoom chat and we'll do our best to ask them at the end of the call, or we'll follow up with you, connect you to Rich as part of our initiative. So Rich, will you get us started by telling us a little bit about yourself and your professional background in 30 seconds? No, I'm just kidding. Take the time you want.
I've been doing this for a long time. I never really wanted to be a photographer, but I had a high school teacher that kind of forced it on me as a project, and I had some success with the first roll of film that I ever took at the state level. And at that point, I was told I had a good eye for photography, and maybe I could do that. I still didn't really want to, but I didn't have anything better to do. So I kind of owe that teacher a little bit for over 30, 40 years now, close to 40 years now of having a camera in my hand. I love to do what I do. I get up in the morning and I think about things that I'm going to write about or photograph, and I go to bed obsessing about those things, and probably dream about them as well.
Mhm.
So I feel lucky. I get to do what I like to do, and get to meet a lot of folks that seem to let me do it.
Right. And you've done some of that as a professional journalist. Have you can you tell us a little bit about kind of the places you've used that in your professional background?
Sure. I worked for a little weekly paper years ago back in Rhode Island, and then didn't do it for a while. Went and got my education. I have a Master of Fine Arts in with a concentration in painting, not in photography. But I also went to a photography school where I graduated. It was like a commercial school. After I got my master's degree, I ended up with a part-time job at the Meadville Tribune, and ended up getting a full-time job within a year there, and stayed there for just about 18 years before coming down to the Derrick and the News Herald. And then I was there until March, until COVID.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that most of the people on the call recognize you, at least by name. You're usually behind the camera, not in front of the camera. So
Yeah,
you've
why.
become very familiar to us in our region and where we get stories from. So you certainly are an artist through your photography, but also painting. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your painting background and kind of how those two relate or how they evolved?
Sure. For years, I tried to keep those things completely separate. My photography and my painting were two different parts of my brain and two different approaches. You can only do that for so long before you see them kind of intermingle after a while. My painting's always been figurative based, just like my photography. I'm not a landscape photographer. I'm not a landscape painter. I'm a painter of figures and people, and I photograph people. Always looking for some sort of a narrative to tell or some sort of story to tell. Yeah, so I spent a lot. I'm horrible at drawing and painting, but I find that one thing in my life is if I'm pretty bad at something, I continue to do it anyway.
And what they say, we're always our own worst critics. So I know that that's through your eyes, not through other people's eyes, because we think you're so talented. Well,
Well,
have
we
you?
do different ways of approaching things. So you learn to work with that's the thing. You learn to work with what you're good at and also what you're not good at. So you can sit there and stew and wish you were better, or you can just keep working and eventually get, somewhere where you're communicating.
Yeah, I'm sure that you have been surrounded by other photographers and artists, and you've watched them evolve in ways that they don't themselves recognize, right?
Sure, yeah, yeah, it happens all the time, and plus you learn from each other.
Yeah.
Um, some of my heroes in photography and even painting were folks I hated when I first saw their work. I had, but it bothered me enough to investigate more why they were in books, why they were, famous
Hmm.
artists and photographers. So I would learn. It's just that I didn't have a vocabulary for it. I didn't know why they were considered any good at all. And as a result, I tend to gravitate more towards things I don't understand than things I do understand. And I think that's part of why I like journalism so much, because you don't want to understand a thing if you're trying to tell somebody else's story. You want to learn. That sounded wrong, but you want to learn as you go.
No, I feel like we're mining your story a little bit right here.
Uh,
That's that's quite interesting. And I think the fact is that, I'm so glad you're talking about that, because I think when we talk to each other and stories evolve. So that's one of the reasons I'm so interested in doing this as a chamber, is because I think we do it better together, and we need each other as we find our stories. So has storytelling always been part of what you do, or did you always recognize that as storytelling in what you do, or is this something that you kind of learned and discovered along the
um,
way? So it's a bit, cliche right now. A lot of people talking about storytelling. Has that always been part of your approach?
it's maybe my imagination was always big. I kind of my next closest sibling was 7 years older than me, so I found myself playing by myself a lot and learning how to have an imagination. So I had an imaginary friend when I was a little kid, so I'm sure that we came up with all sorts of stories. I used to play with for hours on a wall with my Matchbox cars and things like that. So, yeah, I think storytelling's always been there. It was different, when I was a kid. It was making up stories just for myself, but you know,
Now, particularly with what you're doing right now with your blog and your website, you're doing a lot of writing too. So, the um, I'm curious about which comes first. So, we recognize you really as a journalist. You almost always have a camera around your neck. But I'm wondering, did it start by taking pictures and then a story comes out, or are you often kind of know the story and then it's capturing it in the photograph? Do you have a way you work, or how does that all work?
I wish there was a quick and easy answer to that, but there really isn't. You you meet somebody, you meet a situation, you stumble upon something, you see something, you hear something, and it can be a long time before you have a photograph, or it could be the first thing you do. Um, I've worked on stories for months at a time, and those a lot of times, a lot of photographers that work on projects like that will tell you that you spend an awful lot of time not making photographs or not even taking notes. You spend a lot of time listening and getting a feel, so that when you do see something, you have a better idea of what it is that you're seeing, so that you can then take note or capture it in some way. But I don't certainly have a point A to point B strategy,
No
or
magic formula.
there's nothing. No.
No. And Rich, you are admittedly one of our older storytellers, like me. And so I'm guessing that you have some stories that have changed over the years, that you've told story, whether it's through your photography, your journalism, and a few years later, you watch, just like your artwork, you watch things kind of evolve and change. Is that
Uh, yeah. Well, technology changed. We used to have to get everything done in a very succinct manner, because we only had so many frames of film that we could budget for. So digital photography, I'm definitely a digital convert for an old guy, because when all of a sudden we got digital cameras, it allowed us to spend more time, and we got better at storytelling because we could spend more time. It's not that we take more pictures per se, although we do,
Yeah.
um, but we're allowed to spend more time simply because it's faster. Just a Friday night football game, I had to leave as close to the end of the first quarter as possible just to make deadline when it was filmed. Now I can stay in the game and catch the celebration afterwards and plug it into my phone and be an hour or two before deadline. It's just a totally different system, and it makes us better. It's allowed us to be better. I shouldn't say it makes us better.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about that much. So I'm glad you bring that up, because I think about even writing too. The same thing. We're here as we are working on a newsletter today, and we used to just the time schedule we used to work on to tell a story
Mhm.
used to be so much longer than it is now, when we can hit the button and go, and we can make changes so much easier.
Oh yeah, layout is it can be fluid right up to the point of printing. You know,
Yeah,
you
that's
can
a
change
really
anything in a very quick amount of time.
really interesting. So I think one of the things I'm already learning in this process of working with our members for storytelling is and for the sake of one, a little bit of we're trying to control the time that we hope before before we're free of the COVID threat and our lives are going back to normal, and thinking about spending the resources of money and time, that we're limiting a little bit this kind of step into storytelling. But I think what we want to encourage people to know is that we are not going to finalize your story with one meeting or two meetings. That this is really more about exploring what your story might be and what the various ways of storytelling are. And that's going to be different if depending on who's in the room and who you're telling the story to. So, kind of going through that process with us. When someone meets with you, where would you want to begin? Would you tend to want to begin by, taking some pictures and then exploring, or interviewing, actually writing something and then figure out, or does that change from story to story? But for the sake of this initiative, what can people likely expect is the first thing that you're going to want to do if you meet with them?
Yeah, I like to be a fly on the wall as much as possible. So if you have a business, I want you to, it's like I'm not there. I might be there with my camera. I might just be sitting in the corner watching or whatever, but it sounds creepy, I know, but it's the best way for me to get a feel for what's going on is just to observe what reality is.
Mhm.
If you tell me that you're really good at talking to somebody and then I watch you fumble around talking to somebody, then I've got a false impression right off the bat. It's going to be harder for me to tell a story. Whereas if I can witness how you go about talking to people, then I immediately get a better feel of how I can document and ask some questions.
Yeah, that'll take some thought for, I know, some of our listeners, if they want to do this. How do we make sure that that is all really genuine? How can we let you into that? It makes you vulnerable, but it's important if we really want to connect with people.
Yeah, generally when I do an assignment, I'll say, when are you doing that? When do you like, just say a baker, right? When do you get up and, mix flour? When do you get up and put the bread in the oven, And then I'll be there. And almost everybody says, well, I could do that anytime you need me to. And I'm like, no, when do you do it? I can work around your schedule, because if all of a sudden you're doing it at 2 p.m, it's going to be different.
Yeah, when Val was on a couple weeks ago, I know she talked about one of her favorite projects with us here at the chamber was when she got to go behind the scenes of the bowling alley, something that most people don't get to do, and we all wonder about the magic back there, right? So the opportunity to go behind the scenes and see what's going on, and again, and depending on what your business is, that might be a very vulnerable position to be in. But I think our customers want to know. They want to know what goes into making the bread. So
Yeah, just don't want to know what goes into making sausage. That's all.
yeah, sometimes you don't want to know, but it's important. So you do have some experience with social media, and I know you've evolved over that too. I'm sure you remember the days where we didn't have social media. It's been a challenge. I don't know if you're in a position that you're comfortable saying this yet, but as you watch others, particularly in business, do social media, do you find that there are things that you feel like they could do to build better content? Are there ways that you could influence that through the kind of work you do?
Well, there's always ways of doing it better. Always. You with social media, there's too many platforms for me. I can't wrap my brain around TikTok, and I don't even know. There's all sorts of. I'm one of those guys that is likely to say Facebook or face. I've gotten
Yeah.
so that I actually know how to say Facebook now.
Yeah.
um, Twit face or something like
Yeah.
that. But yeah, I think social media is you need to connect with the people that you connect with, and you do it on a regular basis. If you don't, you'll lose them. And especially the way algorithms work now, you spend a week away from doing something and now you've lost, 100 people or a dozen people, depends on how many people you need on your network. So it's a matter of keeping it sustained, keep doing it, and be consistent, I guess, with your platforms.
Your audience, yeah.
Yeah, I have folks that tell me I should be using Twitter more, and I just it's one too many things for me. So I throw something on Twitter once in a while, but I'm not utilizing Twitter the way, certainly not the way the president utilizes Twitter. So
Yeah, yeah, I'm the same. I actually used Twitter was one of the first social media platforms that I used when I stepped in to the whole game. And we had to kind of make a little community around here. And all we did was tweet each other. We were
right.
basically just running it like a little chat. And then Facebook evolved to what it has, and we kind of all switched over. It seemed, at least for me, a little older, it seemed easier. I keep getting kind of teased back in Twitter. I don't look at it every day, but I actually watched a documentary about a photographer last night. So made me like, what am I missing? I think that's the biggest thing. I think, well, who might be interesting out there that I want to go after? Um, if you aren't using Twitter, that would be interesting to talk to some of our listeners about. But I think what I always loved best about Twitter is the ability to be really focused. So if there's something specific I want to go after, it's easier to search and find my tribe than it is on Facebook. Um, but but again, it's been a long time. Things have probably changed out there, so I don't know how that's all working. If a business chooses to work with you, and we actually hope that maybe a lot of the people that are going to be working with us on this initiative will choose to work with more than one of you, an opportunity to do some writing, photography, and some video. What's the best way for them to prepare to get started with you, to make good use of their time, and knowing that the end goal is that we connect people better to their story, how to use the tools to tell it. How can they best be prepared for the experience with Richard?
Um, well, I'm not sure how to be prepared for this, but um, for me, I just need a little bit of information about who, what, where, and when, and then go from there. I like to do a little research ahead of time. Like if you have a website, I'd like to see what it is, what you have. If you use social media, see what you're using, how you're using it, and then I can sort of go from there. Um, but for me, with just if we're looking to tell a story of a business, a story of basically it's a family, right? It's a group of people um, doing what they do together. It takes just a little bit of time. You need to sit with people and experience what it is that they do, how they interact. Um, and I listen. I try to get those little tiny bits and pieces. Like Susan, you mentioned something to me one of the last times that we talked about maybe coming in and doing this sort of a thing with the chamber itself. So earlier today when we were talking before everybody came on, I wrote down your little story about your mom's neighborhood table and you dunking cookies in coffee cups. That is probably that one little thing right there, whether you know it or not, is probably why you're a chamber director.
Yeah, yeah,
Is that type of little thing that's happened, that was it's a fun memory, but it's also incredibly meaningful. And we just talked about it, how much you love coffee, and that's how we came on that story.
yeah. It
So
becomes part of your kind of your character and your makeup and getting to those things.
yeah,
Yeah, I love digging in and finding what motivates people, what inspires people, and I don't know about you, but I get excited to want to be invested in. So, um,
yeah.
you know,
And
who
with
do we want
social
to do
media,
business with? People we know and trust.
now, those little that could be one sentence that you just throw out on a tweet or you know, did you, you could do, as a business, you could do, did you knows,
Yeah,
like was it Warner Bakery? How many people know that they're the ones that originally created the smiley face? I mean, everybody knows that, but maybe not everybody.
yeah. And doesn't that make us all want to go buy a smiley cookie today just to see? Yeah, yeah. Great business with a great story, to be sure. So I'm gonna just say in there when I ask you
Yeah,
what
well,
how can bet people prepare, I think one thing people can do to prepare to work with you and the others for that matter is be willing to be vulnerable, be willing to get real and allow you into the real experience of who people are, right? So some
yeah.
stories are obvious and others really have to be excavated. So we've kind of talked about this. Is there a time when you like instantly know, man, this is a story that needs to be told? Oh, there's a story. Is there something that jumps at you?
Oh, I'm sure there are. I mean, there's things that you stumble on and immediately it's like a great moment. Um, and you just try to record it as much as possible. But it doesn't mean that's the end of the story or the whole story even. A lot of times it's just the initial I don't know, jumping off point, I guess. But yeah, it's any time that you can connect a human emotion right off the bat, you're immediately grabbing somebody's attention that they can relate to. So yeah, yes.
Great, great. Well, we still have a few minutes, and so I want to let the listeners know there's a little bit of homework that people can actually do if you're thinking, oh, I kind of would like to do this, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure that my business is the right business. Before we have you meet with one of our storytellers, we are asking you to watch a video that we just think is great. It's Simon Sinek TED Talk. Sinek is Sinek. You'll get it when you Google it really quick because it's I think the second ranked TED Talk of all time. It's called How Great Leaders Inspire. It really is compelling and why we need to know our story. We've also been looking at Story Brand, which again, Google Story Brand, you're going to find lots of information. You can watch lots of videos with Donald Miller. I've watched some yesterday while I worked, and those are a couple of things that will help get you kind of primed for the whole idea of storytelling and thinking about your story. We have a few questions we'd send out ahead when you make an appointment with us, and our goal is that when we go ahead and schedule an appointment with Sydney, Val, and or Richard, that you'll have already had some time to think about that. But we do know that we need to build in a little more time, I think, for them to get to know you before they really start to craft what they're doing. So I think it's a great process. It doesn't mean that you have to invest a lot of time, but if you think that you're going to be doing what you're doing in your business for a while, why not? Why not invest some time? Day like today, we're not going to go outside and run around and enjoy the sun. We're going to invest ourselves in who we are and what we do, and hopefully get to know each other better. And then I think the really the other great thing is let's help others tell their stories well. When we all have our stories well told, there's a corporate story that gets told about our region that we can all share. And I think that's really compelling as we try to inspire people to want to make their lives here with us, and ask others to either come back or move here and invest in what we're doing today and what we want to do with our future. So, Richard, I'd invite you to add any closing thoughts. Before I do, I'm going to change slides. I got so engrossed in our conversation, I did not advance the slides. So there's a picture of Richard and a link to go out to his website where you can see some of his photography and read the stories that he's been telling on a regular basis now. So, Richard, any closing thoughts?
I'm on Facebook. Message me. If you have story ideas or for things that you want to work on or things that you think I should just know. A lot of times businesses, just being in town, you talk to people and you hear things that would make great stories. So, let us know. I got a brand here.
Good. 8 and 322. Yes. So that's getting, it took me a while to get the numbers right, just like Facebook time, all that stuff, space. Yeah. So 8 and 322, read some of Richard's stories. So next week, we're going to be back, and Ashley's on here. I hope she'll help me remember that. I believe next week, we're going to talk about some of the chamber platforms. How we can use your stories. Most of you know that we publish a newsletter every month, and we've worked very, very intentionally over the last few years to try to make that newsletter more about telling our member stories. We want you to get to know each other better. So how you can help us share your content there on our website. Your stories are who the chamber is. So it's really important that you be thinking about your stories, sharing them with us, and then we make sure that we are using our platforms well and or developing new platforms for sharing your stories. So we're gonna talk with staff about that next week, and maybe even have a little bit more of a free flow conversation with some of you if you're willing. And then our last in our Shift, Sustain, Succeed series. This has been going on a long time, and we're not going away. We're gonna keep doing new things. But the last week, we're going to talk about how important it is to make sure that your information about your business is consistent and accurate and posted in the right places. So we'll talk about some of the places that people go looking. They may not go looking for your story, but they're looking to connect with you. They need to know when you're open and where you're at if they need to visit your business and how to contact you. So we're going to talk about some of those platforms and how to really have a good plan for making sure that you are easy for people to find when they need you, and how to do that most efficiently, effectively, and affordably. So I think we've got a lot of good stuff here. A reminder that out on our website, we have our regular posting where you can find the registration form for the next 2 sessions. You can find recordings of these. So later today, you'll be able to watch the session back if you need to just hear more, or you'd like to share this session with someone that wasn't able to attend today. And then anytime we mention resources, we'll have those out there. So I mentioned a few of the videos today. So we'll go ahead and get those updated out there so that if you're like, not sure if I'm ready for this, but let me check out that story brand and the Simon Sinek video, you'll know right where they are. You can take a look at them. So you'll see them on our Shift, Sustain, Succeed page of our website. So it's been a pleasure. It's always great, Richard, to visit with you. And I hope I'll get to see all of you live and in person sooner than later. So I think our storytellers are going to stick on here for a few minutes, and the rest of you go on and have a great day. Make the best of this very rainy day.